I love when somebody laughs at my phrase, use ADP to your advantage or draft based on ADP. I love it when they take it out of context or they don't fully understand what I'm trying to tell them. Am I telling you to take ADP, draft on it because that's where the player's value is? Use it as your rankings. No. What I mean when I tell someone to use ADP data when they draft is to use it to manipulate, drafting players as late as you can, taking advantage of the data, manipulating the environment so that you don't take somebody too early or you make sure you grab somebody before they fly off the board. I'm not drafting off ADP data as my rankings list, as my order of who I'm picking off one at a time. I'm not advising anybody to do that. Instead, what I'm actually telling you is that if Hopkins is the number one ranked wide receiver on the board, according to the pre-rank list, which is driven by ADP data, that doesn't mean you take Hopkins there. It means Hopkins is likely going to go first when a wide receiver is taken next. Diggs is likely to go first once Hopkins is off the board. Ridley's likely to go once Diggs and Hopkins are off the board. It does vary a little bit, but within 1, 2, maybe 3 players at each positional category. Ridley, Diggs, and Hopkins are going to almost always be the next wide receiver taken in a draft if this is what's left from the wide receiver category. So what I'm telling everybody when I say use ADP data when you draft is that if Jefferson's your target and you want Jefferson, but these other guys are ranking in ahead of him, if you know that you have this many wide receivers available, mixing in the running backs that are available, the quarterbacks, the tight ends, you know you can get away with waiting several picks until at least you see Jefferson breaching the top 3 to 4 wide receivers left on the wide receiver board from your draft app through the pre-rank list. It's all about the pre-rank list, manipulating it to your advantage. Let's break it all down. Let's go.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. Smitty. Take a lap. No, my friend. Using ADP data to draft, using ADP data to your advantage does not mean drafting off of it. It's all about manipulating your environment so that you can clean up and pick the best player available at every single draft selection. Every time. Okay, let's say for the sake of argument, you are on the clock in the second round, but you have 2 picks in the second round. So we'll call this the second round. We'll say that you have a pick 15 and you have a pick 22. So pick 15, pick 22. Including the 15 pick, that is 8 picks from 18 to 22. And according to the draft app, these are the top players available currently on the clock according to the ADP pre-rank list, which is driven by ADP data. You're on the clock at pick 15. And if Justin Jefferson is your must-have, you have to ask yourself, do you take him now or do you roll the dice that he's available based on the influence that the pre-rank list is going to provide? People don't typically vary too much from the top 4 to 6 available. People are going to pick those guys off one after the other in maybe a slightly different order, but it's going to be the top 4 to 6 rotationally going off the board constantly. And if we narrow it down to a position, it's like the top 3 of that position. So if we're looking at just wide receivers and we filtered this list down, it would be MT, Diggs, DK, probably one of those guys going with the next selection. And then once he's taken off the board, then Ridley would be tossed into the top 3. People are very predictable and influenced by that pre-rank list. That means Justin Jefferson is likely going to fall to this 22 pick if you're talking about an 8 pick difference between your current pick and the next pick that you have, and the fact that there's 11 players on the board and Jefferson's ranked according to the draft app as the 11th best player available. Will you get it wrong sometimes? Will somebody snipe you and take Jefferson? Probably. It depends how competitive your league is. Are there people that are total sharks? Has the ADP pre-rank list been updated and trusted. Right now, if you draft in January, everybody knows the pre-rank list is jacked up. So I don't know how much it would guide you in the current environment on draft apps right now. Once people start getting into mock drafting heavy, they will rely on this data. Nobody wants to be a fool. Nobody wants to have a move that everybody laughs at and calls a reach of a pick. People tend to stay with what's in front of them. So with this pick, if you were to take, let's say, Stephon Diggs here, you're probably going to get Justin Jefferson here. You're going to have two better players than you would have had you reach for JJ here and had a leftover player down here that you don't like even close to as much as Diggs. It's worth the risk than taking Justin Jefferson 11 picks too early according to the pre-rank data. If Jefferson's your target or AJ Brown's your target and you have this many wide receivers available on the pre-rank list, not to mention the running backs and the quarterbacks and the tight ends available to mix in to make AJ Brown even further down on the total pre-rank list, you don't go take an AJ Brown at number 17 when he's this far down on the ADP rank list, especially if you're just looking at wide receivers, because he's even further on the total pre-rank list. Number 17 overall should not be AJ Brown. In the case of Justin Jefferson, let's say you're on the clock at number 11. Jefferson shouldn't be your number 11 pick because there are 1, 2, 3, 4 wide receivers ranked ahead of him, other running backs to mix in, and again, the quarterback tight end position as well. Or in the case where you actually already traded up and you have the 11 pick and the 15, Justin Jefferson's the guy you wait on, and you take another player ahead of him and get the best of both worlds. You get the two best players you could have possibly taken if you don't use ADP data to your advantage and you take Justin Jefferson out of turn. Not that you can always trade, I get that. There are certain scenarios where you take your guy, but in general, if you can wait based on the draft, the flow, where you pick next, you can take extreme advantage of your entire league and land better players. Probably the dumbest approach I think people take into a draft is going,
I'm going running back,
without even considering the flow of the draft. That's like going into a game and saying we're going to run the ball 4 straight times, not considering the defensive formation, not considering the game flow, not considering where they're at on the field or how many yards they need for a first down. Not adapting to what you're facing at the time you're facing it is a ridiculous approach to take into any fantasy football draft. Best player available will always be the number one recommendation I give you heading into any draft, anytime, any year. 15 years from now, I'll tell you the same thing. And ADP data can help you make the best pick you could possibly make at every single pick when you're on the clock, and that's called best player available, and it's the only way I recommend to draft. Subscribe, follow, tell your grandma, tell your friends, tell everybody, and get on over to Smitty1.com, which has everything that I do, all of my products, all my social handles, everything all in one place. The most recent show here on YouTube is always going to be on Smitty1.com, and of course the link to my Sleeper U news. Get your news from me at SleeperU.com. Why would you not? I give you a redraft, a dynasty perspective with every single news that I drop on SleeperU.com. So learn about it, get on over there. Get on over to Smitty1.com and get on over to HeySmitty.com, which is all found on Smitty1.com, and order a phone call from me so we can talk about fantasy football, Netflix, whatever you want. Let's go.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. I'm Smitty.